What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 17 deadline. So I'm going to go through the latest press conference information, answer some of your questions, and then take a quick look at my own team as well. So if you enjoyed the video and find it useful, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and get your predictions submitted over on Sleeper for the Let's Talk FPL Pick'em League. Another prize on offer this week. You can use the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. More on that to come later. So the thing everyone's been waiting for is a Cunha update, and unfortunately we don't really have one. The new manager was asked whether or not Cunha would be available for Leicester away, and he said, "I'm not sure. He is an important player." And at the time of recording, there hasn't been an update from the FA about what's going to happen with this charge that has been brought against Cunha. So this is what I would say on current information. If you're looking to move him to Isak, I think that's a good move. Like, Cunha could do really well against Leicester. That's a really good fixture. But Isak is better this week and better moving forward as well. Would I do it for a -4? Potentially, but I'd be a little bit less keen on that. For everyone else, I think Cunha will get banned. I'm not convinced it happens as quickly as getting him banned for Game Week 17. And I think there's a pretty good chance that he's going to play, and the ban will come in later on once everything has kind of been sorted out. So for anyone else that's not moving to Isak, who looks like a good long-term option, I'd probably just hold Cunha. Like, Leicester away is such a good fixture, especially if you've got someone decent on the bench. There's lots of good forward options out there right now, especially like Raul Jimenez against Southampton at home. I still think João Pedro is good value, less than 6 million. But Cunha for one more week just feels worth holding on to. I guess the thing you've got to think about, if Cunha does end up missing Leicester for whatever reason, let's say the ban comes to fruition after the deadline, how badly is that going to impact your team? If not that much, then I would keep hold of him because the upside is there with that Leicester game. So moving to Isak, fine. Anyone else, I think I'd rather just hold on to him and take the risk that he starts. But unfortunately, at the time of recording, I really don't have anything else to go on. So let's start with Liverpool, and there's not a huge amount to report. Arne Slot confirmed there's only 2 players missing from training, which is Konate and Bradley. So in terms of minutes going forward for Trent, they look pretty good. Of course, they could play Gomez or Quansah right back if they wanted to, but none of them are a patch on Trent Alexander-Arnold. So until Conor Bradley is back, I would expect Trent to play most games, even though there probably will be some early subs there. With Konate still being out, that looks pretty good for Gomez's minutes, but I still think long-term that's not a spot you're going to want to use for a Liverpool player, so I would probably continue to avoid him. In terms of timelines, Slot was asked, and they put it up on the Liverpool website, about when they might be back, and he said, "That is what I've said before, it's quite difficult. I thought that Jota would have been back a bit earlier already, and sometimes the end stage of rehab takes a bit longer. Sometimes they join training and then they are like, I'm not ready, or I'm not completely ready to start. So let's wait and see, but we have very good rehab personnel over here," etc. So no timeline on Konate and Bradley. Last thing we kind of heard was start of January, so they might be back soon, but that's not a guarantee. So I think it's good for Trent, good for Gomez in the short term, but I'm not sure he's someone I'd want to put in my team. On Jota, lots of people going to be looking at him as a big differential for Leicester at home. Didn't start the game against Fulham, came off the bench. Didn't start against Southampton in the Carabao Cup either, came off the bench. I don't think he's going to start Spurs either. I think they're going to take it slowly with him. Then he might start against Leicester. That's the money game, so you could take a punt on him. But I think if he starts Leicester, it's very unlikely he also starts West Ham. So personally, I think Jota is just too risky to bring in, especially at Christmas when there's so many extra games. If it was Spurs away this week, then a week's break, then Leicester, then a week's break, then West Ham, I'd maybe be a bit more inclined to go with it. But considering that Slot has said he's back later than he would have expected, and he hasn't started the last 2 games, he is probably going to get 1 start at least over the next 3. Is that enough for someone that costs more than 7 million? Personally, I don't think so. But if you can predict a start against Leicester, there could be big points in it for you. With Game Week 17 right around the corner, don't forget to get your predictions submitted in the Let's Talk FPL Pick'em League over on Sleeper. Completely free to play. You can use the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. And there's prizes every week. We've given away a lot of Premier League shirts, lots of Amazon vouchers so far, and there's another £50 Amazon voucher up for grabs for whoever gets the most predictions in Game Week 17. So I'm going to submit my predictions for Game Week 17 now. Aston Villa versus Man City. I'm going to go for an Aston Villa win and hope that Man City continue this terrible run that they've been on. Brentford versus Forest, I'm going to go for an away win just because of how many issues Brentford have got, especially defensively. As much as I want Ipswich to beat Newcastle, as someone that doesn't have Hull, Gordon or Isak, I'm going to have to back Newcastle. West Ham versus Brighton, there's a question about João Pedro coming up later. Hopefully this is the game where he gets back on the score sheet, so I'm going to go for a Brighton win. Arsenal to beat Palace, Chelsea to beat Everton, but I'm not expecting a huge amount of goals. Then Fulham to beat Southampton, Leicester to beat Wolves, Man United to beat Bournemouth, even though that will be a tough game. And then I think Spurs' defensive problems will be too much to overcome, so I'm going to go for a Liverpool win. That's all you have to do, completely free. You can use the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. Whoever gets the most top predictions in my league will get a £50 Amazon voucher for Game Week 17. If there's more than one of you with the same amount of correct predictions, I'll do a draw on the next deadline stream to determine the winner. That's all you have to do. Check it out before the matches start. So quick update on Bournemouth, because I know some of you still own Antoine Semenyo. On Team News, it basically said pretty much the same for the last game, so against West Ham. No recoveries from injuries, so the likes of Tavernier, Senesi, etc. are still out. No fresh doubts. So presumably, that means Semenyo is available. Now, you can frame this a couple of different ways. Because he hasn't been mentioned, and we know that he did go off early with a hamstring tightness, that he is still a slight doubt going into the Man United game. But you could also frame it that because he wasn't mentioned, he could just be fully available and fit, right? We just don't know, which in some ways is a problem. No one is buying Semenyo right now, so that's easy. I think if I had him in my squad, especially if I was just benching him this week, I would look to hold on to him. Because after Man United away in 17, it's Palace at home, Fulham away, Everton home. That is not a bad fixture run. When I looked at the stats on the Game Week preview the other day for players at his price or less, no one really has better goal threat than him. Like, Sarr might be an option at Crystal Palace now, but he's got Arsenal this week. I'm just not convinced Semenyo to Ahmad, Enzo, Iwobi, etc. is worth a transfer. If he's in your 11 and you're worried about his minutes against Man United and we don't get any more updates before the deadline, then maybe you could look to get rid of him. But it was just tightness. Iraola said that after the game. It's not a hamstring injury. So potentially he could be back for this Man United game. I guess if there is a slight concern there, they might not play him the full 90 in every game over Christmas. But there's not necessarily a huge amount of players that are going to play all those minutes anyway. And at this point, you've already missed the price drop because he went down to 5.6 from 5.7 last night. I still think he offers really good value at that price, despite the fact his returns have not been great. The underlying numbers are good. The fixtures are not bad either. I think returns could be coming, but I cannot guarantee you he's going to play this week. But I would lean more towards the fact that he's probably available more so than going to be out. So for Fulham, we had some really interesting updates from Marco Silva from an FPL point of view. So first of all, Joachim Andersen is back, and he's only 4.2 million. So if you're someone that's got him in your squad, he's now available for that Southampton game. Don't know if he'll go straight back into the 11, but if he's fit and available, he almost always starts. So I think if you've got him, I would definitely play him. And that would be a consideration for me if I was buying a Fulham defender this week to ignore Robinson. I don't think that buying Robinson has been a bad move whatsoever. The guy is absolutely nailed. And 4.8 million is still a pretty good price, decent from an attacking perspective. But I'd rather save the 0.6 and just go for Anderson instead. That money could be useful in the future. What's maybe even more interesting is Silva said that Tete will be out for a long period. He doesn't need surgery, but will be out of sessions for 8 to 10 weeks and then longer to recover. So Tete, their right back, is going to be out for 8 to 10 weeks plus, which means someone else has got to come in and play. Who is that almost certainly going to be? Castagna. Now, he can put up attacking numbers as well, like Robinson. He only costs 4.2 million. So I think with Tete out, he's likely to be pretty much nailed on. And again, I think it's hard to justify paying the extra for Robinson. So if I'm buying a Fulham defender now, after the press conferences, I'm going for Anderson, who's absolutely nailed on when fit, or Castagna, who should be nailed on until Tete comes back. The only slight issue potentially is if Fulham decide to go into the market for a new right back in January. But I'm not sure how likely that is. Castagna is not, he's a player that will do well enough in that Fulham team. I'm not so sure that he needs replacing straight away. So the only real reason to go Robinson over Castagna is guaranteed minutes long term. But 8 to 10 weeks, you're looking at what, like the end of February, and then potentially recovery time as well. You might even be wildcarding them. Probably not. Wildcard, I think, likely to be game week 30 or later. But it's a long time to save up transfers. At 4.2 million, even if he comes out of the team, he could just be your fifth defender later on. So I think with this update, I wouldn't be buying Robinson, not because he's bad, but because I'd rather save 0.6 million. So Brentford picked up a few injuries midweek, one of which was Ethan Pinnock, and this is what Thomas Frank said. Ethan, I don't know the full picture, but of course, when it's a hamstring injury, it's never top. So probably we look at a longer one. So no timeline, but he's expecting him to be out for a little while. And the problem with players picking up injuries at this time of the season is you don't have to miss many days to miss quite a few game weeks. So even if you look at game week 20, which is Southampton away, so we've got 3 game weeks to play before that, the deadline for that week is the 4th of January, which is only 15 days away. So if you're relying on Ethan Pinnock to play a few matches over the next couple of game weeks, I would look to move him on. If you're in a position like me, where Pinnock's just on your bench this week and your defenders are probably all going to start, I don't think he's a rush to get rid of, but he is someone you're going to have to think about soon if you're relying on him. For me, for example, I might have wanted to play him in that Southampton game. Now I probably can't rely on him. Another player that picked up an injury was Sepp Vandenberg. Frank said, Sepp got a minor groin injury. I think it will be too quick to turn around for Saturday, but we will see the next 24 or 36 hours to see if he can be ready. It's probably too quick. So Vandenberg's probably going to miss the Forest at home game in 17, but may well be back for 18 onwards. Now, game week 18 is Brighton away anyway, and 19 is Arsenal at home, but potentially he could be useful for those of you that own him for Southampton away. So just keep an eye on that. And then there was some quotes on Thiago. I'm not going to go through them in full because not many people own him. All I can say is he's got an injury and he's out at the moment. Not sure how long for, but if you've got Visser, that probably just continues to mean that he'll get pretty good minutes over the next few weeks. And if you've got him for Forest at home, he's probably worth keeping unless you're going to sell to someone like Isak or Jackson instead, or if you need to go down to like a João Pedro and Raul Jimenez to free up money, but the price difference isn't huge. So I think Visser's minutes continue to look pretty good. Forest at home, a decent enough fixture. No harm in keeping him for that. So quick one on Crystal Palace. Glasner has confirmed that Eze is out of the game against Arsenal in game week 17, which obviously weakens the Crystal Palace attack a little bit, maybe bolsters the Arsenal defence a tad bit as well. Probably doesn't change things a huge amount. For anyone that owns Eze, apparently Glasner is expecting him to be back for Bournemouth, which is game week 18. So ideally you would hold on to him and probably bench him this week and then hope that he's back for game week 18. The good thing is that Glasner is quite open. For anyone like me that was thinking about buying him in game week 19 for Southampton at home, this wouldn't necessarily put me off, but he is a player that we can never fully trust to stay fit. And that is a bit of an issue. When he's fit, he always plays. Got no concerns about that. But I'm a little bit worried about bringing him in 18 or 19 if he's not fully fit at the moment. And he's not that long back from the last injury. So at 6.6 million, which is what I think he is, this may be worth looking elsewhere, to the point that I might actually just start looking at Sarr instead. He's 5.7. He's played 80 plus minutes in so many games recently. The underlying numbers look good. It might just be worth going for him because he's fully fit at the moment and a bit cheaper. But at the moment for game week 17, no one probably should have been buying Eze anyway. I definitely wouldn't now. So let's get into some of your questions. What are your thoughts on selling Solanke, probably to Chris Wood? So my quick thoughts would be, if you're selling Solanke to Isak, that seems like a pretty good transfer. If you're selling him to someone cheaper, I don't mind it if you're using that money to fund another move. If it's simply using one transfer to go from Solanke to Chris Wood, I'm just not sure it's worth it. Like, Solanke is more money, but unless you need that money, he's not a worse option than Chris Wood, in my opinion. Like, his goal threat from open play is much higher, even if he doesn't have penalties like Chris Wood does. And Liverpool at home is not an amazing fixture, but the 3 afterwards, Forest away, Wolves at home, Newcastle at home, they look okay to me. And I know the perception in the wider FPL community is Solanke hasn't been great. And to be fair, when you look at kind of bonus points and stuff like that, he has been frustrating. He's only picked up bonus in the Aston Villa game, but this is a guy that started 13 times and got 9 attacking returns, 5 goals, 4 assists. We know he can find the back of the net. We saw it twice against Man United yesterday. To put it into perspective, Isak has started 14 games, so 1 more, and has 2 more goals, so 7 goals, 4 assists. So Solanke is not that far behind, and I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that Solanke is as good as Isak, because he's not. Solanke doesn't have penalties. Isak does. Isak is a better finisher as well. But in terms of expected goals per 90 so far this season, Solanke is basically on a par with Isak. Now, Solanke's finishing, when you look back at previous seasons, is not great. He often underperforms his expected goals, but he gets so many good chances, he will eventually return. And he's cheaper as well at 7.5 million. So I think selling to Isak, fine. I probably wouldn't worry so much about Jackson because of the 5th yellow card, although if he doesn't get that, he is better. And I don't mind a downgrade either, but in isolation, would I rather have Solanke or Wood? I'd rather have Solanke in a free transfer. So is Morgan Rogers to Amad Diallo worth a free transfer? I think this depends on how often you're having to play Rogers over the next few weeks. So if we compare their transfers, Rogers in 17 has Man City at home, followed by Newcastle away. Not terrible, but not great either. Although the way Man City are defending at the moment, it might not be the worst fixture you can play. But I would argue that Amad Diallo with Bournemouth at home and Wolves away is better over the next two. So if Rogers was in my 11 for both of the next 2 game weeks, maybe I would look to use a free transfer. But in 19 and 20, Rogers has Brighton at home and Leicester at home. That Leicester at home game in particular looks really good. And I know for my team, I may need him that week. Like I might want to bench someone else. Whereas Amad Diallo has Newcastle at home and Liverpool away. Liverpool away is not a great fixture on paper. So I think it depends how much use you're going to have for this player in your 11. If they're mostly going to sit on the bench, it's probably not worth a transfer. And when you look at the stats side by side, with all the goals and assists that Amad has had recently, he looks like he's unstoppable. But the underlying numbers don't necessarily suggest that. Now, numbers can change, but from what we've seen so far this season, Rogers is sitting at 0.21 XG per 90, 0.15 expected assists. For Diallo, it's 0.19 XG and 0.14 expected assists. So on paper, looking at the stats, they're quite similar players. So although it looks right now like Rogers is rubbish and Amad Diallo is amazing, I'm not sure it's as black and white as that. The only other thing I will mention is the more returns that Amad and Enzo keep getting, the more people will want to buy them. And if Rogers keeps blanking, he will be sold. I know for me, when I look at my transfer page and on the list view, I bought Rogers for 5 million. He went up to 5.4 at one point, but now he's gone down to 5.3. I've lost 0.1 selling value. If he goes down again, it doesn't affect me, but depending on when you pick Rogers up, you might start losing a bit of money. Now, if you're going to keep him long term, not a massive issue, but just something to consider. Also, Rogers is on 4 yellow cards, so he's still got to get through 3 more games without picking another one up. Otherwise, he will get suspended. But I personally would rather just wait until that happens and then make the change, rather than doing it early for a player that I might not even need. But if I was picking one up right now new, I would go Amad. So would you sell Smith Rowe this game week? Now, when you look at his minutes, I think it is starting to become a bit of a concern if you're someone that's still got him in your squad. Didn't start against Liverpool in game week 16, 21 minutes off the bench. It was 59 minutes against Arsenal, so he came off before the 60th minute, didn't get the appearance point, and then 70 minutes against Brighton. So generally, I think he is someone to look to get rid of long term. But this week, I'd be very tempted to keep him, because Southampton at home on paper is a great fixture, even though they've now obviously sacked Russell Martin. It's still going to be a decent fixture. But more importantly, maybe, Andreas Pereira is suspended for this match. So there is a very good chance that Smith Rowe will start. Now, he may well only get like 65, 70 minutes still, but that's enough against Southampton. There's quite a few good options at his price and below at the moment, like Sarr at Crystal Palace, Enzo, Amad, etc. But if Smith Rowe is going to start against Southampton, a 1 game week shootout between him and those other options, I'd probably just stick with Smith Rowe. And also it gives you another week's worth of information. Where does Enzo play? Does Amad start again? How well does he do? Etc. And I think for what it's worth, Enzo and Amad are both probably just good options moving forward now, especially for their price. But with Sarr, for example, at Crystal Palace, it's Arsenal this week, so you don't necessarily want to buy him anyway. So not only does it give you potential for a lot of points against Southampton, it gives you another week to think about long-term what you want to do with him. So generally, I think if you'd asked me this question and Andreas wasn't suspended, I probably would be leaning towards selling because there's a chance that he doesn't start. But with the potential for him to be in that 11, I think I'd hold him at least one more week. So is it time to offload João Pedro? Now, I think this discussion is quite similar to what I talked about with Dominic Solanke. If you've got a lot of money lying around that you don't need for a different move or a future move, and you want to go to Nicholas Jackson or Alexander Isak, that seems fair enough to me, right? I'd rather have those 2 players than João Pedro in isolation. But outside of that, I think it's worth remembering that João Pedro has pretty good minutes right now. He's on penalties, cost less than 6 million. The stats all season have been pretty good. Yes, he's only got 1 assist in the last 4 games, but those kind of things can change quickly. He hasn't suddenly become a terrible player, right? Let's not forget, against Bournemouth in game week 12, 1 goal, 1 assist. City off the bench in game week 11, 1 goal, 1 assist. He can deliver the goods, and he's very, very cheap. So I don't think there's any other forward that I would move to this week, apart from maybe Isak and Jackson, because I'd rather just have the extra transfer. Because all it takes is João Pedro to score against West Ham, and suddenly you'll be thinking different. Then you'll be looking at it as, well, game week 18 is Brentford at home. That's a good fixture. Oh, and he's really good value as well. So I know he's in a bit of a run where it's not going great, almost to the point where you'd rather have him off the bench because of what he did before. But the minutes are good right now. Welbeck's got problems. Like, he's going to be in that team as a 9 or a 10. I just can't see any reason to use a transfer on him for most people. So for my team, I'm almost certainly going to stick to the plan that I spoke about yesterday, which is to roll the free transfer, which would give me 4 free transfers in game week 18. So lots of flexibility. I'm not rolling transfers for the sake of it. I would like to get Isak into my squad. I just don't like any of the options when it comes to downgrading. So I've got Raya, Gabriel, Saliba, triple up against Crystal Palace away. Not an easy fixture, but they're going to be missing Eze. We now know that. Trent against Spurs away, not great, but long-term decent option. So I don't want to sell him. I've only just bought him. Palmer, Fernandes, Mbeumo, Salah all look really good this week. Potentially selling Fernandes or Mbeumo to like an Amad Diallo could be an option. I'm just not convinced I want to do it this week. I just think Fernandes and Mbeumo will both start in decent enough fixtures, on penalties, all that good stuff I always talk about. It just doesn't feel like the right week to sell either of them. Jimenez, Southampton at home. Can't guarantee a start, but I already own him, so I'm going to play him. Solanke, Liverpool at high. More than happy to sell him to Isak if I can get the money. And then João Pedro, as I've spoken about already, still a really good value option going forward. So I just don't see myself selling Fernandes or Mbeumo. It might be that Amad Diallo against Bournemouth at home and Isak against Ipswich away absolutely smashes Bruno and Solanke or Mbeumo and Solanke, but it's not a guarantee. And it uses up 2 free transfers. So I feel like I've got to be sure about selling those players, and I'm just not sure about it. The only thing I will consider is selling Saliba. And with that Castagna news, or the Tete news, which means that Castagna is pretty much nailed, getting in a 4.2 million differential before Southampton at home sounds quite nice. The other reason I'd be slightly tempted to do it is because of the Pinnock injury. Now, Pinnock is not someone I was going to rely on for the next couple of game weeks, but he could have been useful to me for that Southampton game later, which he's now probably going to miss. So what I could do is Castagna in for Saliba. Southampton at home, definitely better than Palace away. Then I sell Solanke to Isak, which I don't think anyone would argue against. Right? Solanke's fine, but he's not as good as Isak. That leaves me $1 million in the bank. So when it comes to game week 18 and Castagna has got Chelsea away, I could just bench him and sell Pinnock instead. And I would probably be buying Munoz at Crystal Palace because that's my plan for game week 19 anyway. I would just be bringing that transfer forward a week. The only slight issue I have is Crystal Palace's fixture in 18 is Bournemouth away. I just don't see a clean sheet. I know Munoz is attacking, but I don't see a clean sheet there. So essentially, I'd be using 3 transfers over this week and next week to have Castagna against Southampton at home and Munoz against Bournemouth away, rather than Saliba against Palace away and then Ipswich at home. But it would mean I would have Isak. I'm a little bit tempted to do that, because I think all it takes is a Castagna return against Southampton. His price will skyrocket once people realise that he's probably going to be nailed on. So maybe by the deadline tomorrow, I will end up with Isak, but the most likely outcome is I roll the transfer and then possibly even roll in 18 if I don't need another move. But that has become quite tempting. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Make sure to get your sleeper predictions in as well and join my league using the link in the description below. Rate 5 stars if you listen on podcasts, and I'll catch you tomorrow for the deadline stream.